Hey guys, and welcome back to the second part in my journey through the entire Assassin's Creed franchise in search of answers. We'll pick up, well, at Assassin's Creed 2, which is where a lot of people think the series went from an interesting title to one of the greatest of all time, and while I wouldn't say I totally disagree, I certainly have a few takes that might ruffle some feathers. No need for a long intro here because there's a lot to talk about, and there will be no restraints on spoilers taken from this point forward. If you're ready, let's talk about Assassin's Creed 2. So, with Altair's story completed, at least for now, the story of Assassin's Creed will have us walking in the footsteps of another. And I'm pleasantly surprised to say that even though they didn't really need one, Ubisoft has given us a solid narrative reason to do so. Lucy, who was an assassin the whole time, rescues us, and while we're on the run from the Templars, Desmond will need training. Obviously, there isn't time to do it normally, but it's been established that the Animus has what's called the bleeding effect, where spending time in your ancestors' memories can transfer you some of their physical abilities. Let's not comment on whether or not that makes sense. So they select the memories of an ancestor that has access to the information they need, but follow him from the beginning of his journey so that we can learn alongside him. This gives us a logical ability to do a gear reset, but also expand on the move set over the course of the game, and I really like that. In the first part of our series, we walked in the shoes of Altair, a master assassin who had to grow as a person and would eventually become a mentor to all assassins. Now we're transported to 15th century Italy to follow the journey of someone who many consider the best in the series, Ezio Auditore de Firenze. I have a lot of thoughts about the story to be found here, but that's going to come after the gameplay because there's a ton of progress in between the two titles. Right off the bat, the game just feels different. Altair was born and raised an assassin, trained in subtlety with the confidence to move slowly. Ezio is a brash young man who knows nothing of the war in the shadows, but he's strong and fit, moving faster than his predecessor. The climbing feel is completely different here. While Altair felt stiff and calculated, Ezio feels free and fast, at least in comparison. And part of this must be attributed to the environments they find themselves in. Acre, Damas, and Jerusalem were all relatively low, flat cities with narrow, crowded streets. Italy is different, with tall, magnificent architecture and wide streets brimming with life. Look at the climbing speed difference. If Ezio moved like Altair, he'd never get anywhere in this city. Combine his youthful exuberance with new climbing techniques like the leaping ledge catch, and you have the potential to go from climbs like this to views like this. Now, that's not to say all this newfound speed makes you uncatchable, far from it. Where Altair was the fastest in any given city, the introduction of lightly armored soldiers that can outpace Ezio make escape all the more difficult. And while that sounds interesting, I think it's where they went wrong. Let me explain. In the first game, the choice to fight or flee was interesting because you may have been faster, but you were also the better fighter. Scampering across the rooftops was fun because it felt like you were a step ahead of your enemies, but only a step. And with a limited number of hiding options, sometimes it was just easier to fight a couple of guys off. This feels kind of the same for Ezio, but here's the thing. Whether flight is the best option is entirely down to two things. Are there runners in the group, and how quickly can you break a line of sight? Your ability to disappear into a crowd feels fantastic when you're just an inch ahead of your competition, but often if there's no runners, it's unnecessary. You'll outpace everyone else, and you can get just far enough away to end the chase. On top of that, regular troops are now much better at pelting you with rocks to get you off buildings, meaning there's only so much ground you can cover before you're forced back to ground level. So if you can't flee vertically, and you can't outrun them, there's no longer a choice. It's fight or throw a smoke bomb. Now you can argue that you can just fight long enough to kill the runners, but they like to dance away from you in combat, meaning that you're likely to dig into an existing force at least partially before you pin them down, and at that point you might as well finish the fight. So, okay, flight may or may not be on the table in this adventure. So how's the combat? Like most of the game, cool up until a point. Your wide array of options means you have lots of cool animations to see over the course of the game. Fighting with an empty hand has a satisfying thump to it that allows the opportunity to disarm your opponents, which is useful against larger weapons that you can't counter. Your new dual hidden blades mean that unlike Altair, Ezio can fight with his hidden blades in combat. They have a narrow timing window compared to swords, but dish out satisfying kills when done correctly. High risk, high reward, just how we like it. Small blades find a balance with larger windows and still relatively high kill output. Swords are by far the most defensive, with large windows to defend against shots, but often requiring more than one counter to finish off enemies. Hammers are essentially like big swords with early game defensive stats, but do massive damage, leading to eerie thuds upon contacting an enemy. Lastly, you can grab one of the large weapons off a higher tier enemy that, while slow, deal massive damage, but are essentially throwaways as you can't carry them at your top speed. There's plenty of ways to keep yourself entertained with the combat, but after about halfway through the game, you'll have seen all the neat animations, and while getting good at dodging and peppering your opponents with strikes is fun, combat will likely become more of an annoyance than anything. Don't get me wrong though, the combat here still leaps and bounds above the first installment, for the most part, but it just hasn't quite reached the best of the series yet. Where that peak is to be found is certainly debatable, and something that I'll discuss after I've replayed all of the games. For now though, all you need to know is that the added flair this game has is certainly welcome, but lacks the substance needed to make it interesting long term. With that, let's talk about the world we get to walk in. Like I mentioned before, the cities in the first game felt very flat and samey, where the differences between Venice, Florence, and Forlì are noticeable even at a glance. While they will each feel unique, with Florence having a very wide, sprawling expanse, and Venice's canals and towering, intricate architecture providing new and exciting challenges. The new notoriety system, while pretty simple, means that you're only as famous as you want to be. The increasing awareness of guards over the course of the first game is logical, and in theory does a solid job adding difficulty. In reality, it just made getting around town more difficult. Here in Italy, you have much more ground to cover on a daily basis, and it's nice that for the most part, you can do it unmolested. There's also just so much for Ezio to do. While Altair was just simple target after target, we have Templar lairs to fight through, assassination contracts to fulfill, races to run, assassins' tombs to climb through, a villa to restore, and much, much more. We find ourselves in a broader, more diverse world with so much more to do, and I love it. But it comes at a cost. There was clearly a pivot towards a more spectacular experience, and while I think that they achieved that, it does have it falling flat a little bit. Let me explain. In pursuit of giving you a flashier finish line, they took some of the corners off the track, and on a first playthrough, even a second, that feels good. It feels like you're doing something that's so cool, but on repeated playthroughs, you really start to notice how there's only one right way to do things, and all the challenge is just getting to that one thing the best way possible. Kind of like early Hitman games. While I do think that some substance was lost in search of expanding the game, I do think that the trade-off was worth it overall. It's a different protagonist with his own reasons for doing things. The brash and spectacular moments fit Ezio far more than the methodical assassinations of the first game, along with the fact that for Altair, it was just business. For Ezio, this is personal. I will say that this shift in ideology left the story a bit lacking, and we need to talk about that now, so let's sum up the gameplay. There's so much more to do, and you'll probably have more fun while doing it. Go and enjoy the sprawling new world they made in Italia. Just be willing to leave some time between playthroughs. So, I said that Ezio's kills were personal. Let's get into why. You'll start off as a rambunctious 17-year-old getting into a fight with the Pazzi, a rival family. It sets the tone right off the bat for what kind of character we're going to be stepping into, but there's this one little thing that irks me. The defining feature between Altair, Ezio, and Desmond is a scar on their lip, which I think we're supposed to believe Ezio gets here, but it definitely looks like this rock hit him on the left cheekbone and not the right side of his lip. And I don't know why, but this really bothers me. Anyway, Ezio will enjoy a friendly scrap, rob some dudes he beat up to cover medical expenses, scamper across the rooftops with his older brother, and make a visit to the lovely Christina, along with an escape from her less lovely father. After running some errands for your family, like getting feathers for your youngest brother, beating up the asshole who stepped out on your sister, going with your mom to see Leonardo da Vinci, and delivering letters for your dad, you'll come home to find that the men of your family have been arrested and are set to be executed. You'll climb up to their prison cell to ask what you can do, and your dad will instruct you to gather the things behind a hidden door in his office and deliver them to a friend in Uberto who will use them to exonerate the family. You'll don the now iconic assassin's uniform and take your first lives as some corrupt guards come to kill you. After delivering the evidence, you'll attend the execution to see your family released, but we start the now long-standing tradition inside Ubisoft of dead parents used for character motivation when you're betrayed and are forced to watch your father and brothers hang. It's honestly possibly the most moving moment in the entire series, and one that I think they could have lingered on a little longer, but wanted to be a little more family friendly, which I suppose I understand. This is where Ezio's story will really begin, and I'm about to start getting vague on details because they're irrelevant to my overall point. While unknown to him, Ezio will fall into the arms of the assassin network, being trained first by Paola, learning how to move unseen through a crowd, which really is the coolest thing they added to the game. You'll then use codex pages from your father's office to have Leonardo build you your hidden blade, and when you're ready, you'll track down and kill Uberto, the man who betrayed you. With the deed done, you'll take your mother and sister and flee to your uncle's villa in the hopes of safety. He'll teach you how to better fight, but will insist on dragging you into the Assassin's War with the Templars. Considering the youth of Ezio, I have to commend his reasoning and courage to stand against his uncle's wishes here, wanting nothing more than to get his mother and sister as far away from this violence as possible, intending to sail away to Spain where they can live in peace. It's not to be, however, as Mario forces his hand riding to battle against the Pazzi, guilting Ezio into riding out to help. The overflowing rage he lets out on Vieri when he kills him shows that his thirst for revenge hadn't faded when he killed Uberto, only that he put it aside to do what was best for those around him. But with this, there's no more denying it as he's decided to kill them all. I think I came to hate Mario in this moment. Acting as a voice of reason for the boy he himself pushed to war is hypocritical at best. But what's done is done. Ezio has given up his hopes of peace as he returns to Florence in search of the lives owed him, starting with anyone who had anything to do with his family's death. His first stop when returning home will be his friend Leonardo, and I really like the response he gives him here. Almost afraid of the man who walked through the door wearing Ezio's face.
But you are not the same at all, are you?
Your time in the city will be mostly dedicated to working with the Thieves Guild, led by La Volpe, to take down the Pazzi conspirators and help the Medici when they're targeted like your family was. After saving Lorenzo Medici, you'll kill Francesco Pazzi and use him to send a message to the others. Death is coming, and he wears a white hood. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more will fall to your blade when it's all said and done. And this sounds like a really cool story of vengeance for those evil men when you talk about it in this way. But when you're actually playing it, the missions feel more like they were designed before the story was written, which actually isn't uncommon in gaming, but it does make them feel a bit uneventful. There's no build up to these kills. The missions literally take minutes. The longest one being the one where you don't even kill him yourself. You just finish him off after tailing him to a meeting where he's stabbed by Rodrigo for his failures. At least the one with the priest was pretty neat, I guess. You'll say goodbye to Lorenzo and head to see Leonardo before you head to Venezia, where it turns out he's also left for. How convenient. Wouldn't you know it, you'll run into him on the road there and help him flee for some guys that are there to kill you. What a good friend. You'll arrive in the city of Forli to board the boat to Venice, only to find out you need a pass to board said boat. Thankfully, Ezio's the main character, and he's able to save Miss Caterina Sforza, who happens to be an incredibly powerful woman, and gets him onto the ship. More about her later, but for now, we sail for the floating city and new problems. You'll also be pulled out of the Animus to run around the warehouse when you get here, but no one cares. You'll get to take a tour of the city with Leonardo and drop him off at his office before going to scout your next target, the Palazzo. Interestingly, when you get there, you'll see the Thieves Guild make a poor run at it and carry the thief Rosa to safety yourself, which gets you in with the local guild. You'll do some work for the guild to prepare for another run at the Palazzo. One big thing you'll get is the ability to do the climb leap, allowing you to reach new heights. Literally. Apart from that, you'll also kill some traitors and rescue those who remain loyal from their prisons. Lastly, you'll remove the archers around the place and replace them with your own, and again, this sounds really good in theory. Like you're preparing for an assassination attempt that's going to be difficult. But outside the climbing lesson, it's all effectively means nothing, and you'll be going in alone for another night out scratching a name off your list. At the end of the day, if you give me a straight line to my target, I'm just going to take it. Although it is nice to see Ezio adopting the gentle demeanor of more experienced assassins as he lays his targets to rest. You'll tail a Templar meeting and learn of a plot to kill the Doge inside the Basilica, one of the most guarded places in the game, and time being short, you'll reach for extraordinary measures to get in. And what that means is using Leonardo's flying machine to do a mission that I found extremely frustrating. There was clearly a right path, and I clearly never found it. I mean, seriously, I must be stupid, because I died more in this one mission than in all the other games combined. On top of that, you'll fail to save the Doge in time, and your very grand gesture will lead to chasing an old man around a courtyard in a very unspectacular moment. On top of the assassinations themselves feeling, for the most part, uninspired, we lack the thought-provoking last words from the original title. It makes it feel a little lackluster and just fails to have the weight of Altair's kills. I certainly could have settled for fewer but more interesting targets. The next part of the game is probably my favorite, as it's the chapter during Carnival in which the city gets redressed in a festive mood that I really enjoy. You'll meet a very interesting nun who runs the local whorehouse and go through the process of getting ready to kill I don't know, somebody the game claims matters. You'll be at a party where the only way in is to wear a golden mask, and you can win one by competing in a number of carnival games. I like a lighthearted, fun environment, and honestly, this is just a nice change of pace. You'll play Capture the Flag, which almost drove me insane because of the janky setup, score some ribbons from some lovely ladies, run a race across the area, and the most fun, beating the dog shit out of as many guys as they can throw at you. Naturally, none of this will matter, and the mask will be awarded to a Templar friend, and you'll pickpocket it from him on the way to the party. Something you probably could have just done in the first place, but oh well. I bungled the mission, but the idea is to shoot the guy during the fireworks and make a clean getaway, which I'll admit is neat. Next up, you'll meet Bartolomeo and go through the usual blah blah, save his guys, get into some fights, replace some enemies with friends, yada yada, run the big bads and kill them. It's all very samey, no one cares. Moving on. I really appreciate quiet moments of reflection in games, and I thought this is what we got here. And for a moment, it is. But on reflection, it's just a little ironic. Have a listen.
Is it? It's been over 10 years since I watched my father and brothers die. 10 years hunting the men responsible. So close to the end now, but no closer to understanding what any of it was for.
You don't know what any of it was about. Well, neither does anyone else, buddy. This was a basic revenge plot that spiraled way out of control, turned into magic hoo-ha, and nobody really knew what to do with it. Or at least that's how it feels. You'll get word on the Apple of Eden returning on a ship, and you'll tail it back to the Spaniard after disguising yourself as the courier. You'll ambush him and have it out with Mr. Borgia before the rest of the assassins show up and help. And I'm sorry, but this bothers me. How is it Mario that puts Ezio down the path of tearing down Templars, and they help him all the way along, but no one bothers to just tell him what the fuck we're doing? They just sat back and watched him act as an assassin the whole time, and then one day when he's a step ahead of all of them on his own, they're just like, well, good job saving the world, welcome to the club. I don't know, man, I just think it's dumb. I think I might just be mad because I know what's about to happen, though. In the game's original cut, this is the point where they would tell you that the memory sequence has been corrupted and you'd have to skip it only to sell it to you later as DLC. On newer cuts of the game, it just plays into the DLC and you can see why it wasn't there to begin with. Here's the thing, as extra, this is great content expanding on the story and giving you more Assassin's Creed to play a few months after you've probably finished the game. When mixed into the main story, it feels like out of place padding. It starts off pretty cool with the Battle of Forli as our enemies march on an ally, Katarina, who I must say is an awesome character with one hell of a brave face when things get rough.
See, a certain apple indeed. Or shall I slice your baby's necks ear to ear?
Bastardi! You think you can threaten me? I'll give you nothing! You want my children? Take them! I have the instrument to make more!
Where it goes downhill is when after winning the day, you'll be stabbed and lose the Apple of Eden to a black-robed monk. The rest of the time will be spent getting it back from him. You'll start your investigation in the area and track him back to Florence where all kinds of shit is going down. Here's where it starts to feel like padding and where I become conflicted. You will have 9, let me repeat that, 9 lieutenants to kill before you can go after the apple, which, if you've been starved of Assassin's Creed content for a few months, is great because there's actually some really fun missions here. But when you just want to get back to the last hour of the game, it's infuriating. Like I said though, there are some really fun ones in here that I feel really emphasize the strengths of the game, like moving through the crowd to get behind the doctor, timing out the patrol routes of the guards, or patiently stalking from group to group to kill a man leading a book burning. On top of that, almost all these men are serving under the influence of the Apple of Eden, having no control of their actions, often expressing regret when the cold steel of our blade wakes them from the haze they've been operating in. It adds some severely lacking nuance and shows the growth of Ezio as he eases these people from our world with a kind demeanor, knowing that they hadn't wished to become enemies of the peace he strives for, yet doing what needs to be done without hesitation. It's a bit disappointing then when the final boss is reduced to a button prompt, although saving him from being burned by the mob is cool of Ezio, I guess. Then he makes a speech about vengeance and freedom before having a cool walk-off with the assassins that was so clearly intended to be the end of Assassin's Creed 2, not the lead into the final confrontation. This DLC really should have been something you can start at will after it would have been unlocked so that you can do it at the end as clearly intended. It's not that the DLC is bad, how you get to it is bad. So anyway, on to the last hour of the game. Oh wait, no, first you get to collect all 30 codex pages scattered between the 4 major in-game cities. Hope you were collecting them as you went along, unlike me in my first playthrough, or else you're going to have a great time going to get them all. Anyways, once you have all of those, you get to do a little meeting, assembling the map, and head off to Rome to kill the Pope. Wait, did I fucking read that wrong? That sounds way more like the 3rd chapter of a JRPG than a Ubisoft title, but no, I guess I was right, so cool. I guess off we go. You'll battle across the rooftops in Roma before slipping into the Vatican and jumping on Rodrigo Borgia, our final boss, and I repeat, the Pope, which I just think is hilarious. You have a magic weapon sword fight before he'll cutscene his way to an advantage and take the apple to open the vault. You'll then take him on mano-a-mano and challenge him to fisticuffs for some unknown reason. It's manly, I guess. I think a sword fight to the death is pretty macho, but whatever. Maybe they just got scared of actually having their character kill a religious symbol. I guess they wanted to portray that Ezio has returned to his search for peace after seeing that Rodrigo will never be able to access the power stored inside the vault and that killing him will only lead to more violence. It does show a nice growth in the character, as he says,
Get it over with, then.
No. Killing you won't bring my family back. I'm done. Nulla è reale. Tutto è lecito. Requiescat in pace.
Anyways, you'll win the fight, and as the Prophet, enter the vault, where Ezio will be very confused as the Ancient One known as Minerva speaks through Ezio to Desmond directly, warning of a coming disaster and a way to prevent it. This game ends as abruptly as the one before it, with Desmond and the gang escaping Templars in the modern day as the credits roll, sending us into the next title. No, seriously, it really just ends like that. Pope, vault, talk, credits, boom bam, see you next year. So I guess it's my time to wrap it up too. So I'm a little conflicted about the second entry we have here because there's so much more in the moment, but so much less to remember. When you're playing as Ezio, you have a tremendous feeling of scale and the freedom to explore that Altair just didn't have. The story was vast, exciting, and for the most part at a furious pace along the way. The Assassin's Tombs, while imperfect, were fun to explore, and unlocking the armor felt like a solid accomplishment that often feels lacking in games. Templar lairs, races, assassins contracts, just scaling some of the massive viewpoints across the city was tons of fun, but the story is where it really fell down for me. I can't remember any of the characters besides the Potsy kid at the beginning and Rodrigo. Almost everyone who we went after felt irrelevant to the story, unlike Altair's targets. I'm still thinking about the Templar that didn't believe in God, and the one who killed for fun. I still enjoy the questions posed in that narrative, and I just get none of that in this story. It's not bad per se, it's different, and not for better or for worse overall, but it's clear the focus shifted from an exciting narrative to exciting moments. I know I sound negative, but trust me when I say I like this game a lot. I'm just a bit disappointed when viewing it in comparison to what was around it. Overall, I'm happy I went back and played it, but I was far more excited that I got to head into what at the moment remains my favorite game in the series, Assassin's Creed Brotherhood. Thanks for getting through part 2 of the series, guys, and I hope you're looking forward to part 3 as we explore Rome in the next chapter. As always, this is Purple signing off. Have a wonderful night, and always remember to smile.
Where other men blindly follow the truth, remember.
Nothing is true.
Where other men are limited by morality or law, remember.
Everything is permitted.
We work in the dark to serve the light. We are assassins.
Nothing is true. Everything is permitted.
Nice.